Hello, everyone. Welcome to Plant Group 10 in HOR 160 Plant Materials 1. The good thing about this plant group is that every single one of the plants are on main campus. So hopefully you're able to get to one of your on-campus labs or classes and have this group with you and actually walk around campus and enjoy the beautiful weather that we're having this last week in March. So let's go ahead and get started with Plant Group 10. Our first plant is our Kiera japonica, or your Japanese Kiera. This plant is located down in the Hearts Garden, and it has a very distinctive leaf that you're not going to see anywhere else. The only thing that I can think of that resembles this is a chrysanthemum, which is a mum, which you only see in the fall. But this leaf is so unique and so, I don't know, just wonderful in its appearance. Just love it. I love this plant. It looks kind of weedy throughout the year, except when it is in bloom. And as you can see here, it's got these arts and craft little cotton balls that it looks like a real bright yellow. So it likes the shade. It loves the shade down in the Hearts Garden. So it's another plant that can brighten up an area just because of its color. Here we have a close-up of it, and you can see that distinct leaf shape and the design of it, and then just full of the little yellow balls that are all over the plant. It's not as, this plant right here that we're seeing here on the slides looks a lot better and a lot healthier than the one down in the Hearts Garden. But overall, it's still a beautiful plant that we have in the Hearts Garden. There's a close-up of that little puffy ball that I like to call it. I call it the arts and craft ball because it looks like those bag of little puffy things that you can glue onto poster boards and stuff that you did back in grade school. The reason I say that's because my kids still do projects like that. Here we have one in the open, and that's what I wish the one in the Hearts Garden looked like. If it looked like that, man, would we not have those planted all over the place? And you can see this is kind of in a wood setting, so it is getting semi-shade here. I don't know if it's maybe too dark down there in the Hearts Garden or where it's located. It just doesn't look like that. But I know that's a fairly young plant that we see in the Hearts Garden. And there's a close-up of your leaf. And then we have a rendering of the plant. And that's something that I want to start doing in HOR 161 in the fall. If you guys take that, it'll be offered online as well. But I want to have you guys start sketching these plant leaves, and that actually will help you learn it. Not to the extent there on the left, because that is a beautiful drawing of the Kiera japonica, but at least drawing the actual leaf shape in like a sketchbook. Plant number 2, Pinus mugo, or mugo pine. It's your dwarf pine tree. I actually love this plant. It looks really well in like rock gardens, in anywhere you've got a water feature. It reminds me of the mountains. So if you're designing for a client that wants that outdoor feel or that rugged feel, this is one of the plants that you would actually use. It can be used in foundation plantings. The one on main campus is over by horticulture on the block retaining wall that landscape construction students built several years ago. But a beautiful plant nonetheless. It is a tiny pine tree. There we have a close-up of the cones that it is actually producing. Here they are being grown in the nursery, and then you can see the big pines in the backdrop over here. But this is your Pinus mugo. Here's one like in a botanical garden setting. But just a really, really neat plant. And see, it's planted in that rock. I think it looks just really, really good in rock gardens. Reminds me of going like to Blowing Rock and, Boone, and even up on 52. If you like hiking and being in the outdoors, it just resembles that to me. There we have one that has been trained topiary style to grow and make it look like a miniature full-size pine tree. So they're very good for that. Here we see a golden version, and I can't remember the variety right off the top of my head, but it is cool to see that they do have that type or that variety of the Mugo. And then there's one in the natural landscape, in a mulch bed, but we can see one of our previous plants from a couple weeks ago directly behind it. And then you see the rock back there. So like I said, it just fits really well in rock gardens. Close up of the needles. Remember, this needle actually in the groupings will have 2 needles per clump. So that's an easy way to do it. It's going to be the shortest needle that you will see, like on your exams. So if you pull one of the clumps out, it's going to be 2 needles, and it's actually going to be, the length of a needle, like a sewing needle. So one way to remember it, those are small needles. The Mugo pine is the smaller of the pine species. Now we're moving to plant number 3, your Pinus strobus, your white pine. Significant for its growth of these pine cones. As kids, we always collected pine cones. I don't care how old we were. It was a cool thing to do, to have these sitting around in your room. At least for me, it was. Here is a white pine. Looks like it is being grown for Christmas trees, and there's nothing wrong with growing them this size for Christmas trees. I think they actually make a pretty good Christmas tree. I love the smell, but even yesterday when I was collecting samples of these plants, my hands got covered in sap, and it took a few hours for it to rub off, scrubbing it hard and putting lotion on my hands just to keep the stickiness down. But you will get sticky when you pick up any type of debris that falls from the pine, from the white pines. Unfortunately, they cut the main one down on main campus. As you were turning off of Oak Grove Drive into the Strickland Center, there used to be a huge one there on the left. And if you're walking around campus, you'll see the stump. The stump is still bright yellow where they just did cut it. And it seems like every week, one of the plants that I want to show you guys on campus, they cut it down. So luckily the apartments across the street, right there at the corner of Miller and Oak Grove, there are some huge white pines. But if you walk up a little bit further and across from the cash points, you'll be able to get a sample from one of those pine trees growing next to those apartments. They haven't limbed them up as high, so you'd be able to reach up and take a sample. Or there's probably some samples on the ground, because white pines, they are always dropping sections of leaflets and stuff on the ground all the time, and pine cones. There we have a close-up of it. Good thing to remember about the white pine is that they are clumps of 5 in one of their sections. Another close-up sample, relative size of the penny. But if you pull one of these clumps away and you separate those needles, you're going to have 5 in them. Typical tree out in the field. Use this screening. The good thing about the white pines is they are going to continuously drop pine needles. So eventually you're not going to have to mow underneath them, because they're going to keep such a heavy base of pine needles. They are very susceptible to wind damage and ice damage because the wood is so soft. They're going to break apart. But I really like the tree. I like that color. It's almost like a silverish or grayish green in the backdrop, and it just gives you a little bit of different textures, different colors. If you mixed it with hollies and some of the other cedar trees, it's just a good tree. I don't like seeing a bunch of them in a row. I like seeing them mixed in with other evergreens. And you can see the height of the pines there. They do get super tall. And, this has to be somewhere warm that we didn't have so much ice, because ice will kill them and the wind. So this tree here is protected wherever it is. Pinus taeta, your loblolly pine. And as you can see, this is where we get our pine straw. I don't know if any of you were in the military, but you see a lot of thickets like this on post where the military grows these pine trees, and then they'll go underneath it and they will burn the undergrowth. You can almost tell these trees may have had controlled burning underneath it, because the pines, it's not going to kill them. They'll actually control it and burn all that pine straw off the ground, and then you can see just where the barks turn black from the smoke. That's where we get our pine straw from. If you pull one of the clumps, here's a bigger clump right there, but if you were to separate that, you're going to see 3 needles. But this is your loblolly pine. But grown a lot for lumber as well. And as you can see there, there's an individual who's actually probably getting ready to harvest soon some of their trees. But a lot of farmers will actually turn pasture land into actually pines to be grown for lumber and pine straw. And as you can see right here, there's your clump of 3 on the loblolly pine. And you can see a clump of 3 here. So, and you'll see it on the samples in the sample sheet. Here is the Eisenhower. It's at Augusta National Golf Club. Famous for the Masters. I'm a big Tiger Woods fan. So it's been a pleasure watching him throughout his career. Probably one of the best athletes out there in any sport. But to actually go and see the Augusta National Golf Club, is an amazing event. So if you ever have that opportunity to go, I recommend it, because the grounds are absolutely beautiful. Not only the turf grass, but the azaleas and the annuals that they have. And then to see the Eisenhower here is something truly to be proud of, to say that you've done. All right, skip laurels, or English laurel. A lot of people call it that, but this is your Prunus laceratus skip canis, long tongue twister there. But a plant grown primarily for screening. I'm not a big fan of this plant. I prefer the Atalucan over the skip laurel or English laurel. I guess just basically probably because of its name, just the common cherry laurel. But it does serve a purpose for screening. You see a lot of it at the coast. It gets tall, and the samples that we got off campus behind the tech building really needs to have been planted with the Atalucans instead of the common cherry laurel. They're better left alone just to kind of grow their natural size as they are here. The ones there by the tech building have been sheared, and you're starting to see a lot of dying out within the structures of the plant. As you can see, it produces a almost blueberry effect fruit. Does have a gorgeous white flower, but it's not grown for that. It's primarily grown for its screening. But the flowers do pop out and you can see them, but it's not what they are grown for. They are stepping up onto a porch using a foundation, probably a little too big there, but nonetheless, it serves its purpose. You ever see one in a parking lot, like an island turnaround? And if you noticed, you can see some of the pine straw from the dead pine tree, or not the, guys, I'll take that back. That's either a dawn redwood or a Metascoia, and it's dropping its dead leaves, the deciduous cedars that we'll see very soon. I think that is in plant materials too, HOR 161, but you're seeing a lot of the the dead limbs falling out. The tree's not dead; it just loses its needles every year. So it's two of the actual cedars that we'll see drop it: your Doan redwood and your metasequoia. Your Autolucan, your Prunus laurocerasus Autolucan, your Autolucan cherry laurel. Now, I'd say this one is grown for its blooms. Looking pretty snazzy there. And that's a good choice because you got the red brick and you got the white flowers in front of it. So very nice plant. As you can see, they're grown in the fields here. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Joe's Landscaping on 421. Mr. Joe Marion himself, is very well known for being the Autolucan man because they've grown hundreds of thousands of these things and sold them throughout his career, and they still have quite a few over there. And my dad tells me stories of one year that Mr. Marion had to dig a hole on the farm and bury a couple 100,000 of these because we had such a cold winter one time, and they were mass producing them, and they had that hard freeze, and they had to dig the hole and throw that many away just because of cold temperatures. So only in North Carolina do we have to deal with that. Just like us on our strawberry farm tonight here, March 29th. We've got to cover our strawberries tonight with tarps to prevent frost from happening because we've already got a freeze warning for tonight. Good close up of the leaf. Now, when you hold this leaf side by side with the skip laurel, that's about the only way you're going to be able to tell the difference. You'll be able to look at the plants as a whole and distinguish the two, but if you pull a leaf off each one, it's going to be a little tricky. So I highly recommend getting the two samples. This one is in the Hearts Garden, and then the skip laurel's over by the Tech building, but actually get those leaves and touch them, feel them, have them on your sample sheet, your personal sample sheet, and really study the difference in these two plants. And I have to say, I like this plant. It's easy to prune. It's easy to maintain. It is susceptible to some fungus, but you got to keep your pruners sharp and keep them sanitized. But please don't take shears to this. I've seen a lot of people take hedge clippers to the Autolucan, and where it cuts the leaf in half, that leaf itself will die. Not every single leaf within the plant will die, but the ones that are cut with the clippers will die, and it'll brown out and look horrible until next year's new growth. But almost like a bottle brush flower look. It almost looks like you could clean your water bottles out with one of these flowers. Kind of tall, but gorgeous. Here we see it in the landscape, close up of the flower, used a lot in hedgerows, used quite a bit in commercial landscaping. Probably right after the dwarf Burford, you would see this one used quite a bit. Here you see it in a residential setting. So a good all-around purpose plant. If you need a filler plant, this is one to do it, or a what I call a midsection plant, because you've got your smaller trees that you're using maybe on the corners of a foundation, and then you got your annuals. It's kind of your understory or middle growth plant for that type of landscape. Your Pyrus Carliana Bradford, your Bradford pear. You may not like what I'm going to say, but this is probably one of the prettiest flowers you'll see in the spring, but it is the most awfulest tree to have in your yard. I mean, it really is, but the blooms are fantastic. And that's why years ago, I'm talking about, mid 80s, early 80s, whatever, people went on a Bradford pear buy-in spree and planted them everywhere. And then we realized that the wood is way too soft and that every little windstorm or ice storm is going to destroy them. And unfortunately, it's just we've had a lot of bad experiences with the Bradford pears. A lot of municipalities have outlawed them. You can't use them anymore. They are done for. It's just you can't plant them. And in fact, if you lose one to a storm, you got to go back with something different. Here we see the fruit, which is almost like a pear, but it's real small. It's about the size, a little bit smaller than a grape. But these things get spread like wildfire with birds. Um, and once they planted, our neighbor here on the farm, beside the farm, they planted 2 Bradford pears, straight species, in their front yard. And the birds have just littered our pasture with droppings of these seeds. And we've got baby Bradford pears growing up everywhere that we're having to chemically control and bush hog because they are a nightmare. They will eventually take over. Drive by PTO Greensboro Airport on 74, like you're headed to Bryan Boulevard, and look across at the airport right there near the Honda plant, and you'll see all the wild Bradford pears coming up that have been planted by our lovely bird species here in the Triad. We really need to get a control on the Bradford pears because they are highly invasive. And the Bradford pears that are planted in our yards that are being transplanted by the birds, they are reverting back to the old standard, which actually have the thorns on them, making them even harder to handle out in the field. But here you see a Cleveland Select variety, which is a lot better than the traditional Bradford pear. So take a look at this. This is more columnar. It's more a little bit wider at the base, but it kind of goes up, almost looks like a triangle popsicle, versus this plant right here, which is like your true lollipop Bradford pear. Now, that right there looks pretty with the blooms, but I hate the plant. I hate the tree when it's full of leaves. And if you're in the landscape management business or maintenance, this is the tree that's going to drop its leaves just a couple days before Christmas. And so you've got clients calling you upset that you haven't got the leaves up from fall drop. And we're like, hey, Miss Smith, that is a Bradford pear. They lose their leaves just a couple days before Christmas. It's always the week of Christmas that we're having to clean up Bradford pear leaves, always. Here we got a picture of ice damage. It doesn't take much. Doesn't take much. The wood is so soft and brittle that wind and ice is going to destroy them. Close up of the fall color. Now, the fall color is beautiful. I mean, that is a beautiful burnt orange. Looks good, and you see some leaves falling there. But that main drop is late winter, right around Christmas time. There you get a picture of the bud, a zoom in picture of that. Now, this next picture, guys, is the invasiveness of the Bradford pears. Look, you've got Eastern red cedars, again, which are planted by birds. And then you got all those Bradford pears. And this isn't at the airport. But if you were, like I said, driving on 74 or 73 there, headed to Bryan Boulevard from 40, you look over this time of year, you're going to see the invasiveness of the Bradford pears. You're going to see all those white blooms in a field, and you're going to be like, why are those Bradford pears planted there? No, they were transplanted there by the birds. Nobody would ever plant that many Bradford pears in one spot. They are just that invasive. And Rhaphioliphus indica, you may see it pronounced umbellata at times, Rhaphioliphus umbellata, or spelled that way. But I grew up knowing it as the Rhaphioliphus indica, and by Dr. Glass at North Carolina A&T State University, who taught me my plant materials. We learned it as the indica, the Indian hawthorn, and it is one of my favorite plants of all time. However, it is being invaded by a fungus, again, by not sanitizing your pruners and going from plant to plant. People do shear them. Why, I don't know, but it happens. Close up of the leaf, got a nice little round texture there to it, as you'll see in the samples page. You see the fruit there getting ready to pop open, and it is grown for its beautiful bloom. You can get them in pinks, like a purplish, even white. Just a beautiful plant. My dad's always kidded with me. He said, "Son, I can tell you were the landscape designer on this project because it's got crepe myrtles, laurel petalum, and Indian hawthorns." And that was kind of my signature three back in the day. But we've since moved away from that. And they're used in a massing up against a retaining wall, so fairly nice there, and that creates a colorful bed when every single one of them is blooming. So, and then there's one at the nursery, but that is your Indian hawthorn, ladies and gentlemen. And I appreciate it. And I will see you in the next lecture.